The Audio Train programme is supported by the following businesses. Tysers, a leading media insurance company. Garment Printing, supplier of printed clothing and branded merchandise. Prager Metis, an international advisory and accounting firm. AV Resilience, a supplier of technical consultancy and broadcast equipment. Mint & Co, a dynamic legal and business affairs company. And NoteTracks, a platform for audio producers, engineers and collaborators to take notes, get feedback and share projects. Audio Train is part of Audio UK, the trade association for professional audio production companies.
Hello and welcome to this Audio Train webinar about bid writing. Tonight, Miranda Rae is offering her tips and advice based on many successful applications to arts funders. Miranda currently presents on Ujima Radio, that's Bristol's radio's community station, but has a range of experience in promotions, production, voiceover work and training. Hello, Miranda. So how, with all these different roles, did you end up writing bids?
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me along today. Just to put it out there straight away, I'm not a professional bid writer. That is a whole skill in itself. But I've been broadcast manager at Ujima Radio for nearly 4 years. And it was just a case of the chair of Ujima came along and said, look, help. I'm sure if there's anybody out there who works in community radio, they will all appreciate how hard it is to get funding. And my love of community radio, it was just like, yeah, absolutely. I'll do whatever I can to help. And that's where my journey started. Only about 3 years ago.
But, you know, along the way, you've now written bids for all sorts of other providers as well, which I know you're going to go into. Now, you can all ask questions as well, so please put them on the Q&A. But for the moment, I'm going to hand over Miranda because she's got a short talk and then we'll come to your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Caroline. And welcome to everybody. Just to start with, just so you know, I am visually impaired, about 70% visually impaired, completely blind in my right eye. So forgive me if my eyes start going off in different directions. But yes, as we mentioned, I am currently broadcast manager at Ujima Radio. I'm the founder of Sound Women Southwest Network, and it's the production company. And we just founded Sound Women Bristol as a CIC, a community interest company. But my journey in radio started 30 years ago with FTP Radio, which was actually the first pirate to get a legal license 6 months ahead of Kiss FM in London. We then went on to set up Fem FM, which is about to celebrate its 30th anniversary this year. Cannot believe it. And our third generation of Fem FMers. Galaxy Radio, BBC Radio 5 I presented for, and then Galaxy Regional. I went to Asia for 5 years as an aid worker, and I took a hiatus being a mum and was out of the industry for maybe 7 to 10 years on and off. And then I returned to the industry not knowing what to do or where I might fit in. And that's when I discovered Sound Women. And I ended up taking over the regional branch of Sound Women Southwest. And my journey into community radio began. And that's really where I got an incredible insight into a whole new format of radio that previously just hadn't existed. But first of all, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do want to be absolutely upfront and clear that I am not by any means a professional bid writer. Okay, I started about 3 years ago, as I mentioned, when the chair, Roger Griffith, came and just said help. And first of all, I was just like, this is like rocket science. This is a whole nother language. So if we can start the slideshow, that would be great. So is it rocket science? And that's on to slide 2. Sorry, jumping ahead. I'm not used to doing slideshow presentations as well, so bear with me. So far, I have applied for 12 grants and been successful on 9 of them. And but having spoken to other bid writers, their usual success rate is around about 50%. But now bid writing is a very, very niche area and extremely sought after. And good bid writers are literally like gold dust and flipping expensive as well. Plus, you still have to pay them regardless of whether or not you get the bid. As I'm sure you all know, there is a lot of work that goes into writing a grant application, but it is a skill that you can learn like anything else. Now, I was completely confuddled at first. When I started looking at grant applications for organisations like Arts Council, Quartet, Power to Change. I think Power to Change, they wanted me to sign away my firstborn daughter of my grandson and to even get a look in. You know, it was just like, is it, you know, you've got to think, is it actually worth my while putting this much in? You know, you might think, oh, I'm going to get a great big lump sum of £10,000, but what are you going to have to deliver for that £10,000? You know, and actually the more I looked into it, I felt like it actually wasn't worth my time doing one of these grants. Yes, it was very tempting to have that great big lump sum of cash, but you know, I had to go and do presentations that wasn't paid for. You didn't get any expenses. And, you know, you've got to look at what are you saying that you're agreed to deliver? Are you going to deliver 100 workshops over the next 5 years for 10 grand? No, thank you. So, yeah, make sure you look at what you're doing is financially viable. And we will get onto a little bit more about budgets and that in the future. So, slide, yeah. So, you know, as I said, a degree in rocket science is maybe not what we need. So, you know, it's a whole nother language. And I know how frustrating and how inaccessible some grants are. And that means that so many grassroots groups and organisations don't get a look in. And I find that really frustrating. And it's very interesting to give feedback to funders and assessors. But like with anything, it is practice and anyone can learn. So don't fall into the trap of thinking it is rocket science and it's overcomplicated. Because also what I've learned is simplicity is the key. Now, there are so many different kinds of grants, from corporate, community, private, government. And, you know, there's also match funding, which, by the way, I don't know anything about. And grants are hugely, hugely competitive. So you never rely on them. Never think, do you know what, I'm going to set up an organisation, I'm just going to rely on grants. Because not only that, you've just got to look at many different revenue streams. And also don't let funders think you are solely relying on grants to survive. Some grants are very complicated and some are much simpler. So we'll need some serious, and some will need serious amounts of data and others won't. So moving on to slide 3, what can you expect from today? We're already there, sorry. Thank you, we're already there. Okay, so the types of grants I have had success with are the Audio Content Fund. And up until a couple of days ago, I was going to use the Audio Content Fund as an example because I know many of you are in the audio industry. And I know many of you probably think, I really want to know what her, you know, recipe for success was because I've won 3 rounds of the Audio Content Fund. And a lot of today's session was going to be based on that. But as we found out on Monday, sadly, there are going to be no further rounds of the Audio Content Fund. So that's a shame. But, you know, never mind. Moving on. There's plenty of other grants that we can look at. Quartet is another one that I've won. Again, can be quite complicated. I won 3 grants just before Christmas. I set up Sound Women as a CIC in October, and we've so far won £20,000 worth of grants since October. So, you know, once it's very much thinking about the type of organisation you are and what kind of funding is out there, and we'll get on to that. So what can we expect today is the types of grants. You know, there's Age UK is another one that I got, National Lottery Awards for All, which is a very relatively simple one, especially if you're a community radio station. If you haven't got that, go for it. It's one of those ones you can go for every year. And Bristol Registro is another one that I've got as well. So how to find funding. I have compiled, for your delight, a huge list of funders that I've gathered over the years. And I've asked Caroline to share it with you at the end. Honestly, I think you'll all think, wow, she's fabulous. No, seriously, though, it's a wicked, wicked, wicked list of funders. And I've also said that if anybody wants to get in touch with me afterwards and say which ones I've had success with or recommend for the audio industry, then please feel free. Tips for success. We're going to talk about, you know, what I've done right in the process. Why should they care about your grant? What evidence do you have and what are you going to do about it? We're going to look at what those issues are of why you're looking for funding in the first place. And then number 4, pitfalls to avoid, mistakes that I've made because there's been a few really embarrassing ones. And also I've got some tips from other funders and assessors who's given me some great advice to share with you guys today. So moving on to slide 4 is the types of funding, that is out there. And as broadcast manager of Ujima Radio, they were particularly interested when they took me on as my experience at Galaxy Radio of monetizing the specialist music shows. Now, this is the thing. There are so many other ways of getting funding. It's not all about grants, is it? And now, if you are a community radio, you will appreciate the constant need to raise money and always on the look for funding opportunities. But like FTP, Ujima had some of the same issues as just being a very, very small radio station with just a 5-mile radius broadcasting on FM in the city centre, but also online. So to begin with, it was all about making sure that the presenters were producing the best shows that they could. We gave them training, made sure that the shows were in the right time slots. We also looked at how we could market Ujima. And that is something you need to look about as well, before you even start doing some things. And bear in mind, all this is coming from a radio background. So this is very much my area of expertise. Anyway, but before we get into bid writing, I thought I could just take a look at funding in general. And please note, as I said, I'm not a professional bid writer, far from it, but I have had some incredible wins. So just to sort of reiterate, for Ujima Radio, I won the Awards for All, the National Lottery Awards for All funding, which is a great one for businesses and organisations, whether you're a limited company or a CIC or a charity. Age UK did an amazing grant called Age Friendly, which was looking at organisations making their companies literally more age friendly. A fantastic grant, actually. I really enjoyed working on that one. What you're probably wondering is, well, what did I get out of writing these grants for Ujima? Because of, they hadn't got any money to pay me, and it's not like you can pay me a commission. You can't do anything like that. So actually what they agreed is if I didn't get too many in and it was appropriate, then I could project manage some of the grants that we got in. So the age friendly one was a fantastic opportunity to work with elders within the community, and put me in a really good position actually to work in the future with elders. And that's been something that's been really fortuitous and brought in revenue for me and the station, and actually further on delivering workshops and training opportunities for elders through COVID and otherwise. So that was interesting. So the Quartet Megawatt Grant, I won twice for Ujima. That was in association with Bristol Energy Network, who wanted to look at building awareness around carbon emissions. Now, there's a lot of money in the environmental industry at the moment. People compare it to the gold run, that there is so much money out there in environmental issues in general. That's a massive area. For myself, I won the Arts Council project grants, 3 rounds of the Audio Content Fund, and also since I set up Sound Women CIC, Bristol Redistro, which is a very, very small charity. It's always great to look out for these ones. I have never seen such a simple application in my life. Oh my God, it literally was, you just had to write an email and tell them about yourself. And I won 900 quid. Boom. I loved it. It was just amazing. More of those, please. And then also there was one with the University of the West of England and a community fund that they do. And this was around a history project. And this is something else I want to talk about, because there are so many opportunities for oral history projects. If you work in radio, audio, podcasting, there are so many opportunities to share local history. And that, for instance, this one on an oral history project is actually to do with FemFM and celebrating the legacy of the UK's first all-female radio station. So I've collaborated with the University of the West of England and students in the history department. And then also we've brought in some students from the radio department to collaborate with the history students so they can work together to deliver some podcasts. Collaboration is something that can be so important and really helpful if you don't have any previous experience. So maybe you're a new company, or maybe you're new to this and you think, I haven't got any, I haven't got any kudos. I need a bit of, support with who I am and what I'm doing. Then collaborations are great. But then, we set up Sound Women. It was a new company, so we had no accounts. Often your grants will want to see your accounts and things like that. But you know, we had between us years and years of experience, and that was similar with the Audio Content Fund. So you only, and I was gutted when I found this out, if not a little bit angry, that community radio stations weren't allowed to apply for the Audio Content Fund. And actually, when it first came out, I appealed to the Audio Content Fund and to the board and said, look, you know, this is an incredible opportunity for community radio to actually get funding to make radio programmes, and yet here we are, we can't even apply for the money. But then what they did say was that there's no reason why you can't set up your own production company. So I went back to Ajima and I suggested we set up our own production company. At the time, there wasn't interest, and Roger Griffiths turned around to me and said, why don't you do it yourself? And I thought, oh, yeah, Sound Women. We're a company, we're a limited company, we became a production company. And that's how I started looking and bidding for the Audio Content Fund. Anyway, we won't go on about that because we don't know if it's going to come back. But having accounts and stuff like that isn't always essential, because they can see if you're a new company, then all you have to do is send them a screenshot of your statement or bank statement, and they can see that. So as we mentioned, there are different types of grants, from corporate funding, community grants, private, government. There's things like the police force, the fire service, education, universities, museums, libraries. And then there's parts of the NHS, there's mental health awareness, there's mental health days, there's days dedicated to dementia. There's a big thing at the moment that's been going on over the last few years around issues of isolation, addressing loneliness. A lot of data came out a few years ago about isolation, so there are lots and lots of funds out there to address those. And radio and audio can be a great way to address this. Community radio is a superb hub for supporting volunteers, as well as being a public service provider. So as we've mentioned, grants are hugely competitive, so never rely on them and never think of them as your only revenue stream. And some are really, really complicated, and some are really simple. So as a sole trader and as a limited company, a freelancer, I found that there aren't many funding opportunities for a sole individual. There are some out there, but there aren't lots. Now, if you're a non-profit community interest company or a charity, then there are plenty of opportunities. Now, I'm sure there are more, but since I set up Sound Women as a CIC, it's changed massively. I found that writing for Ajima Radio, bid writing for Ajima Radio, was so much easier than me as an individual. Having said that, arts councils around the country do grants for individuals. As in Bristol, they have one called the Originators. The maximum, though, is £5,000, but they expect a lot for their buck. And the competition is massive because there aren't many grants available for individuals. Plus, you have to wait about 6 months to get an answer. So that is something to bear in mind as well, is having a look at deadlines, timelines, etc. Hugely important. You know, you might say that I want to start my grant in June 2022, but actually you're not going to hear back from them until September 2022. So say you're going to start your grant then, obviously the timelines aren't going to match, and that's just not going to work. So as we mentioned, the Audio Content Fund was for limited companies, and they were unlike any other process I've come across, actually. Not only could businesses apply, I found the application, although long, was relatively simple. But as we found out on Monday, there aren't going to be any more. But there are, 4 or 5 days left till the round closes. So maybe at the end, if you do have a question about the Audio Content Fund, I'm very happy to answer it. I think the key is having an idea that hasn't been done before, making sure it's not a second series, and then having those letters of support from community radio stations. Those are the key things. And then obviously the massive evaluation, which is 2,500 words at the end, is bigger than the synopsis or the idea, which I found interesting. And then, of course, if you're in the audio industry, there's the BBC and the commissioning rounds. Now, you really do need a degree in rocket science to understand those. I've not got any experience of that. I've had a look and just ran in the other direction. From the outside, it almost seems like it's only ex-employees that have success, but that's obviously just because they understand the strict editorial guidelines that go along with that. So unfortunately, I have no experience in BBC commissioning. Sorry. And then you'll find that no one fits all. But what you will find is that once you have done one or two, things will become so much easier, as you will get clarity on what it is that you want to do. You know, you're going to have an organisation, or even as an individual, there's something that you're trying to deliver or do in your life. There's some kind of mission, isn't there, that you're trying to do. Like with Sound Women, we're trying to address the lack of diversity and gender equality in the radio and podcasting industry. So that's our kind of mission. Now, if you're already set up as a business or a non-profit, then you will already have thought about your mission statement. And this is going to go a really long way with helping you with your process. So moving on to slide 5, which is how to find funding. Now that, as I said, I've done a huge list for you, which we will share, but simply search online for funding opportunities. Make sure you put UK, because I made that mistake of searching funding opportunities and then they were all in America. But then so many, as you know, as we're all in the audio industry, rather than trawling through loads and loads of funders that maybe aren't suitable, go to places like the Radio Academy, Audio UK, keep an eye on things like that. The Community Media Association are fantastic in their newsletters for letting you know when a grant or fund is becoming available. And they're great sources for funding. Also, as I said, there is this list that we're going to supply for you. There are, of course, major ones like the National Lottery, the Awards for All, which I've mentioned is a fantastic one for community radio stations. It was a really simple and quick turnaround. It used to just be 6 weeks. I know now it's at least 12 weeks until you hear. And they have changed the process. And that's a really good tip, is you might think you know a grant inside out, but actually they could have updated the guidance notes and changed. So it's so important to understand those, and we'll get onto that in a bit as well. Always make sure you've got an idea of what the turnaround time is. As we mentioned earlier, you don't want to be saying you want to start something and you haven't even heard when you've got the grant yet. COVID has made all of these funds so much more competitive. Where I would have said to another community radio station 2 years ago, go for an Awards for All grant, you will get it. I can't say that now. Before, literally, I said to about 2 or 3 radio stations, go get the Awards for All. And they got it. Within 6 weeks, they got 10 grand in their bank account. And what's so great about Awards for All is that it's a real wide range of things, from equipment to running costs. Now, there aren't many grants out there that will cover running costs of a business. You know, it could pay for new equipment. It could pay for a website. Awards for All, National Lottery, check it out. Brilliant grant. Then, of course, there's the Heritage Fund, which they do. And a lot of these things, they do smaller and larger ones. Same with the Arts Council, same with the Heritage Fund. And why I have the University of the West of England grant that I'm doing at the moment, it's not massive. It's 3 grand in 2 payouts. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I'm having to deliver 6 workshops, 2 community workshops. They need organising. You've got to get the participants. I'm also producing a mini-series that's going to go out on 14 radio stations, a 1-hour special and 2 30-minute documentaries. And you know what? I'm not even really covering my costs. I'm covering my costs, but I'm not making a lot of money out of this. But the reason I'm doing it is because we're talking about a bigger, larger project in association with the Heritage Fund afterwards. And the Heritage Fund are the ones that look at like oral history projects and stuff like that. So really interesting to look at possibilities. BCFM did a fantastic project, Marcus Smith, about the 12 different areas of Bristol, hugely successful. So again, really interested in documenting local history. Another big funder is the Arts Council, of course. Now, I've had continuous problems with radio not being recognised as an art form. But that's changing now due to the success of podcasts. But also what you can do, and I reiterate to them on many occasions, is that radio is a platform for the arts. You know, actually drama, storytelling, spoken word, music, surely they are all arts forms. Now, the Arts Council have regional branches as well as the big national grants. And they're all, relatively accessible around the country. You will find this with most funders, that actually they are accessible and you can talk to them. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone, email them, run your ideas past them and ask for advice. I would never have thought that was possible until recently, because I was actually really struggling with the Arts Council one. The first ever grant I went for was the as an individual, the Arts Council Originators one in Bristol, and I was like, this is rocket science. I do not understand this. I do not understand the questions. I don't even know what this thing in underneath it says. After every question, it said weight 10%. I'm like, well, why are they weighing me? I don't know what they're talking about. I don't understand. I got in such a fluster, I even left out a question. And what I found out was that Arts Council do, like every year when they open up some of the funding opportunities, is they'll do a little bid writing course. Maybe it's 50 quid, or they will give scholarships if you are from, say, a non-profit third sector community radio station. I got a lot out of that, a lot out of doing that. So always worth giving them a call, seeing if they've got anything like that. But yeah, running there, getting some feedback from them. But also, one of the first things you'd ever want to do with your idea is have a look and see if anyone else has done it. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of grant you're going for, whatever your idea is, whether it's a podcast, a documentary, a project, has somebody else done it before? And if so, how are you going to do it better than they did it? What are you going to bring to the table that's different? I recently did a project with a group of blind people delivering podcast training and a series of podcasts. And the first thing I wanted to know was what other kind of podcasts out there for blind people. And I had a look, and there was hardly any, other than the sort of the RNIB, sort of like around tech issues. There really wasn't any kind of podcasting for visually impaired people. So we realised there was a massive market, and actually we created the world's first podcast toolkit for blind people, which basically taught blind people how to make podcasts from scratch using whatever software you need to be able to do that give you access via screen readers and stuff. So anyway, with the Arts Council one, I got so caught up with trying to shoehorn my idea into fit, because they weren't, they were saying that radio wasn't an arts form, podcast wasn't an arts form, but I was desperately trying to shoehorn my idea to make my radio workshops fit into the remit, and it just didn't make any sense in the end. The Arts Council England is slightly different. They have a really complicated procedure, I'm not going to lie. You have to set up a portal and get yourself verified first of all. You have to, it's called Grantium, I think, or Grantium, and you need to set that up before you can even start. And then all of your grant applications for Arts Council England, ACE, will go through this portal. And it is slightly complicated, and it's just going to take you time to understand how that works. And it does come with time. Suddenly, I found actually what helped with some of these grants was to do a lot of preparation and then step away for a week or so, which, by the way, is you have to allow a lot of time to write these things. It's not something you can do in a night. It takes weeks of preparation and research and gathering data and information to be able to write a successful grant. So ACE, as I said, can be really complicated, really important to leave enough time with any grant. Anyway, timelines we've mentioned are really important. I think we said that already. Quite often grants. Excuse me, this is the first time I've done a bid writing workshop, so do bear with me, because I'm teaching podcast and radio skills, and I don't need any notes because I've got years of experience. But I just want to make sure I get all the information out of my noddle and share it with you. Okay, budgets is something that I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on, but hugely important that you understand that you get your figures right, that you don't undervalue your project. You get your fair daily rates, and there are access to daily rates through Bectu, the BBC. They've all got great sites out there where you can get your daily rates for project managers. What's a fair rate? Don't think, do you know what? It's normally 250 quid for a daily rate for a project manager. I'm only going to charge 150 quid. Maybe I'll get the money. It won't work like that. They'll just think that you don't know what you're talking about. So that would never work. Just making sure that you have things like a contingency. So that could maybe be 5% at the end once you've done all your budgeting. You think, right, I'll do a contingency, so it's a safety net. It's something if things go wrong, they've seen that you've prepared for that, and you've got 5% of the overall grant will be as a contingency. And same with admin. I tend to do that as well. So I'll say like maybe 5% for a contingency and 5% of the overall budget for admin. There's more. I might come on to budgets in a minute, but there are corporate sponsors as well out there. So as well as looking at all the grants that are available, there are corporate sponsors out there like Triodos. You know, they are massively into supporting environmental issues at the moment. In Bristol, we've got Hargreaves and Lansdowne, which are a massive financial company. Now, all of their staff get 2 days a year to do pro bono work. Now, if you are a community radio station by chance, I don't know who you all are, by the way, and I know that most of you are in audio, so I don't want to harp on too much about community radio and then it's not of interest to someone else. But if you are a non-profit, big companies like this, as I said, will allow their staff to do 1 or 2 days pro bono a week. And I discovered Hargreaves and Lansdowne, and we were having trouble on our website, and they're like, none of their staff get a chance to use their pro bono days. And actually, when I got in touch, they were really pleased, and we ended up collaborating with them and getting them to help with our website. So a lot of these big companies do stuff like that, so it's worth looking into it. And you could get, you know, a website built for free. Just as an example, it could be something completely different. Get your banking from Triodos. That's not going to happen. Anyway, environmental issues is massive. Like I mentioned, there's a gold run on that at the moment. And then current opportunities that's worth looking out for is the Queen's Jubilee. Apparently, there's huge amounts of funding, relatively accessible all over the UK that's available at the moment. Moving on to slide 6, which is tips for success. It's really, really important to have absolute clarity on what your idea is, just like when you're producing a radio show or a podcast, that you know exactly where you're going, your introduction, your middle and your end. You know exactly what it is that you are going to do. What is the problem that you are addressing? Maybe you are addressing a lack of diversity, and you're using radio as a format, or loneliness for older people due to COVID, or children that can't learn remotely due to COVID because they don't have access to technology. What is the problem that you are addressing? And then why should they care? Why should they care about it? Why should the funders care about this? Because addressing this issue could help to children receiving an education, because you're gonna provide laptops for them, something like that. I don't know. What evidence do you have that this is needed? So what data do you have to back up that these children need this technology, or that there is an issue of loneliness in these areas of whatever city that you're in? You'll find your local council will have some amazing information about this. Bristol City Council had some great data about areas of deprivation, which I've used on a number of applications. They provide solutions for these areas. Providing solutions for these certain areas of deprivation are a priority. So if you're going to be offering solutions to an area that's, you know, disadvantaged or deprived, then you can usually get that data online from your local council, and it will really back up. So why should they care, and what evidence do you have? It's really important. And what are you going to do about solving this problem? So you've told them what the problem is, and now what are you going to do to solve that problem? How are you going to go about it? So maybe you're going to run workshops for people in these groups that are going to bring them together so they're not going to, you know, suffer from loneliness so much. Or you're going to provide refurbished laptops to children so they can, you know, learn remotely from home. That's how you're going to solve the problem. So what's the problem you are addressing? Why should they care? What evidence do you have? What are you going to do about it? And why should it be you that solves this problem? What is it that you bring to the table that's gonna, you know, why should they give you the money, basically? What are you going to bring to the table? What experience do you have? So, for example, I've obviously been working in radio for 13 years. I've lived and worked in Bristol for most of my adult life. I understand the communities that we are working with. So, for instance, I've lived and worked in St Paul's in the city, in the centre for years. You know, a predominantly African Caribbean community. I understand that community. I work within it. Or, for instance, the project I work with visually impaired people, because I'm 70% blind myself, then I can relate and be more empathetic. Or maybe it's simply because I can refurbish laptops and I can give them to the kids. Could just be as simple as that. And again, collaborating can be a great way to give you kudos or props that maybe you haven't had before. So collaborating with a technologist, collaborating with Age UK, collaborating with whoever. You know, it could be a venue, it could be a community centre, you know, it could be a museum, it could be a university, it could be a historian, whatever that collaboration is. They love collaborations. So what is the grant for? So really getting an understanding of what the funders are asking for their buck. They will always have an issue that they are wanting to address. What is it that the funders are trying to fix again? So we come back to that. What's the problem they're trying to understand and trying to solve? And it's really important that you get that. So really important to study not just the guidance notes. I mean, we think that's obvious, but it's so important to study, read and read again those guidance notes, but also their websites. Go and have a look at their websites. Go and have a look at all the other projects that they've funded. Going back to what I said earlier, because, you know, if it's already been done, what is it that you're going to do that's different? So, yeah, make sure you really understand the requirements for that grant and never assume they are the same from year to year. Make sure you are up to date with your guidance notes. What is the challenge? So the questions will be tailored to their challenge. They will have very, very carefully honed their questions. And their assessors will be experts in their field. They will have been very, very carefully handpicked to decide whether you are the right person to get their funding. A lot of stuff goes on in the background of funding. I've spoken to a couple of people in advance of this workshop, and it's an incredibly complicated procedure with each question carrying a certain amount of weights. And I touched upon that earlier, like Age UK grant, after each question it had weight. Maybe it said 5%, excuse me a minute, or 10%. At first, I didn't have a clue what that was going on about. Why they keep saying about the weights, and it kept appearing after each question. But obviously, say each question would be 10% of the overall answer. It's like sitting an exam, isn't it? So you've got to get 100% or 80%, and each question has a total sum towards the success rate. I hope that makes sense. It does in my head. Anyway, eligibility. Make sure you're eligible for the grant. Usually most funders will have some kind of eligibility questionnaire at the beginning, which you have to go through before you can even get to apply. So stick within the parameters of the eligibility. They will usually have this questionnaire. So just don't shoehorn your idea into something. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Go on, move on, find something else. And are you going to be giving them value for money? You know, has this been done before? What's different about your idea? We've touched on that already. And just make sure you heavily research your idea. Like with podcasting and stories and documentaries, you're all going to be very skilled at researching. Use those skills at researching before you even start applying for any kind of grant. And just make sure you fit the remit. Okay, moving on to slide 7, pitfalls to avoid. As I just mentioned, make sure you've got the latest notes. But here we go. Don't repeat yourself. What have I been doing? I've been repeating myself. But what can be so difficult is being given a limited number of words to answer your question. So like you've got an online form. Don't even start on the online form until you've done a whole draft as a Word doc. You know, I've made that mistake before, and the last audio content fund, I was filling it online, and then I got somebody to come in and read it for me, and I gave them my sign-in details, and she was a real expert in women's studies, and she updated it and tweaked it and edited it. But she didn't save it, and I didn't know, and it was all late, and I submitted it, but her edits and amendments didn't get saved. Absolutely mortified. How stupid. Obviously, I should have done a draft copy on a Word doc first, and then you just copy and paste it into the online application when you're ready. You know, it seems so obvious, doesn't it? But sometimes these things you just don't learn until you've made the mistake. So, yes, classic mistake that I did there. let me just have a look. Yes, done that. Guidance notes. Here we go. Don't shoehorn your idea. We've mentioned that already. Don't repeat yourself. Don't push the boundaries. Make sure you fit the deadlines. We've gone into that. Also, if you're working in audio and radio, really important to look about intellectual property. Who is going to own the whatever it is afterwards? Who's going to own the podcast series? Is it going to be your intellectual property, particularly relevant in our industry? So make sure you check with the funders the legalities of the grant. Make sure it's really clear, so that once the grant's been delivered, can you then still use that material in whatever format it is? For instance, the Audio Content Fund, you own that intellectual property, you own that series. I know several people have gone on to sell their series to the BBC and other production companies. So really important, whatever kind of grant you're going for, is who's going to own it. Collaborators, we've touched on this before. Who's doing what? Who is the team as well? What are the skills that's relevant to the project? Or even if you're a new company, can you prove that you've got years of experience? It doesn't matter if you're new. If you've got 30 years experience, then that's fine. You just need to be able to prove that your team has the experience, and that will be enough. But also, if you are new, then collaborating with an existing company with an established reputation can really help you. You can get funding put into a partner's bank account. But I don't know much about this. For instance, I know I've had a number of people come to me at Ujima and go, oh, we want to apply for this grant. We're not actually an official organisation. Can we use your bank account? And I'm like, nope. Not a chance. But you might find somebody who says yes. So that's worth looking into. Deadlines. Make sure you check your deadlines. That's not going to always say the deadline for the Audio Content Fund's 31st of January. You think it's going to be midnight. Quite often now it's 11 o'clock in the morning or midday. Make sure you check that. I had a bit of a moment the other day when I went on to my online Audio Content Fund application. And for some reason, it said that the deadline date was the 20th of January. And I'm like, what the? Shut the front door, I've missed it. What on earth? I could have sworn it was the 31st of January. But for some reason, I then reloaded and it went back to showing the correct date, 31st of January. I did have a little heart flutter at that point. So anyway, yeah, check your deadlines. Make sure you've got enough time to get them in. It doesn't matter if you get them in at the very last minute. But, you're not going to... If it's gone 11:05, and that's it, you've missed the deadline. There is no if, buts and maybes about it. You missed the deadline, you missed the deadline. But hey, we all work in audio and radio. None of us are going to be late, are we? Nah, not going to happen. I know that. Okay, what was it I said about don't annoy... don't annoy the assessors. Don't keep repeating yourself. What do I keep doing? Repeating myself. Maybe by the end of it, we'll have all got that into our heads, though. Because you get your limited amount of space, don't you, to answer questions. And my God, that can be so hard when you're trying to fit in, this great idea, but they've only given you 200 words to do it. Which is why it's so important that each paragraph or each question, you have really made the most of it. And it's not about flowery language. It's not about intellectual language. It's about simplicity. And that's absolutely key. So make sure you actually answer the question as well. So how are you going to meet the challenges? Don't waffle. Don't fall into that, using, highly intellectual language. They're not going to be interested in that. And just remember how many applications they are going to be reading. I never have, we haven't really. Okay, so that's fantastic. So having clarity of your vision is really important. Doing some market research as well. Going on to slide 8, I think we've got something about language. And that we just mentioned that, haven't we? Don't use loads of jargon. Don't, just be really simplistic in your language and succinct. You're not going to have the time. For instance, with the Audio Content Fund question, describe how this project will provide values to its listeners. How will it change what they do, think, learn, or feel? So in the questions, in the answer, I made sure that I said how our listeners are going to learn, how they're going to think, and how they're going to feel. And that was absolutely, all of those were answered in the question. We've done daily rates and BBC commissioning. Going on to slide 9, which is marketing. I'm not going to go on too much about this because I don't know if you're all into radio, but setting yourself up in advance and getting marketing done is hugely important. It's if you've got data to prove that you've got 30,000 listeners. We all know that in community radio, and it's really hard to provide that data, but you can use social media analytics. Now, it doesn't matter who you are or what kind of organisation or individual or whatever you are. Social media is your friend, and you can use those analytics to prove what kind of reach you've got, and that's hugely important. So there are things like takeover shows. I would love to talk more about how I've managed to monetize community radio and what kind of funding we've brought in and how I've gone about doing that. But maybe that's a whole nother workshop when I know that people are out there from community radio. I've got some great tips and advice for getting funding from the NHS, from the council, from the Home Office. But like I said, that's a whole nother day. Very quickly, moving on to slide 10, evaluation is so important. Evaluating your project, you need to let them know how you're going to evaluate. They might even hold back some money that they're not going to give you until you have evaluated your project. Make sure you tell them how you're going to measure, track your progress report, all your success through that. They want to know that you're going to be monitoring social statistics, posts. Are there online figures? Is there a survey that you can do? Are you doing evaluation sheets at the end of projects, workshops? Make sure that you have that. And if you're doing workshops, have evaluation forms ready. They can be done anonymously. You can have sheets on the wall if you're doing stuff in person for people to write feedback. But just tell them how you are going to evaluate your project. Extremely important to monitor the progress of your project as you're going along, and not suddenly get to the end and think, oh God, we've got to evaluate it. Just do it all along, taking photos, videos, getting feedback from people. That's really, that will serve you well at the end. Honestly, I can't reiterate how important that is. Maybe you could always have an intern or assistant. I tend to do that, whether that's somebody I pay or not. It could be a volunteer. But having an intern and assistant, they learn from me, and then I've also got somebody who's doing all the kind of admin stuff as well, which is great. Make sure you check your rules, okay? Whatever fund it is, just check those rules. It's so important. For instance, the Audio Content Fund, sorry to harp on about it, but they don't fund any second series. And is that grant, can you only go for it once? Can you only go for it once a year? Some of them you can only go for once and never again. The Audio Content Fund you could go for as many times as you want. For instance, the big boys, TBI, Lotus, I noticed that they were winning every single round, maybe multiple wins in one round. But anyway, it just each grant will have different rules and regulations. So slide 11, what's next? How are you going to fund your project after this? So this can be really key. A lot of grants are just one time only. So what they're going to want to know is, are you a good investment? Are you going to be relying just on grants? Will you be able to find other sources of income? Because they're going to want to know that. You could say something like, this grant will kickstart an earned income revenue stream for us that will bring in 3 times more revenue than the grant. And then they can see, great, they are a great investment. Us giving them £5,000 is going to help them turn over another 15. Having a testimonial, nothing beats a story. If you have a great testimonial, you can include a brief quote, someone who you've worked with. I've included references from Marvin Rees supporting me as a journalist. He's the Mayor of Bristol. Dr. Caroline Mitchell, Senior Lecturer at University of Sunderland, who's an expert in women's studies. And then also for event management, then the chair of St Paul's Carnival. So I've got different references for different kind of projects, depending on what it is that I'm applying for. So whether that's a documentary or an event, a series of events, or women's studies. So I've got somebody who kind of fits into each bill. And then somebody else who I just worked with, who just gave me a great testimonial. And yeah, that's always looks great. And then I think we're probably rushing to the end, just checking the time. I've probably gone over slightly. So let's bring in back Caroline.
Hi, well, thank you. Yeah, masses to say there, and very, very interesting. And also, it's stacked up quite a few questions, Miranda, as well. So thank you for that. I'm going to go straight to the questions so that we get as many as we can in before the hour. Just to say, Di would like to know, have you got any top tips on what not to say in an application?
Yeah, don't repeat yourself.
Yeah, definitely got that one.
Yeah, no, but that's so hard to answer, isn't it? Because it is just having absolute clarity. Do not use jargon and waffle on. You won't have the word count to waffle on. So it's just really important to just answer the question that they're answering.
Okay, just flipping that on its head, are there any keywords or phrases that you say, yes, those are good ones to use in applications? That's the sort of language they like to hear.
Yeah, reflect the language that they use. That's a really good thing to bear in mind, is reflecting back the way they've written their question. So I think I said something about that with the Audio Content Fund. They ask you to describe what your listeners are going to learn, think and feel. So you want to actually make sure in your answer you're saying that our listeners are going to think, learn and feel this and this from our project.
Okay. Johnny has said, and you talked about this with the Audio Content Fund as well, because obviously there is a current round at the moment that's about to close, even though the funding in the future is not secure. So Johnny says, we're about to put in a bid for the Audio Content Fund, which closes in a couple of days. Eek. So any tips would be massively helpful. And perhaps Miranda, just give us the top 3 things that you would say about how to be successful with the Audio Content Fund.
How many letters of support have you got? They look massively at that. Have your synopsis. You know, you get the short description and the long description. They want to know exactly what you're doing in your series. So don't generalize. Tell them exactly who is going to be. So say you're going to do a 6-part episode. Who is going to be presenting it? Who are the guests? What is the content? And put all of it in. That's the advice I got. So they're not sure what it is that you're doing. You need to absolutely put the description of what you're going to be doing in your series. I know that seems really obvious, but they want to know exactly what's going on. And then the really important part is the rest of it. You've got the whole audience impact. There's so much I could say about the Audio Content Fund that I can't really fit it all in. There's so many important tips. So if you want to get in touch tomorrow, please feel free.
Okay, that's great. Johnny says, thanks. You know, this is our first attempt at funding, so we're learning as we go. So yeah, we will hand out or we will tell you Miranda's contact details as well at the end of this, so that if you want to get in contact with her, she's kindly agreed that you can. Tara says, can you remind us of some places to find examples of different kinds of rates, please?
So Bec2, which is the sort of union for freelancers, and the BBC, and there was another one that I had somewhere and I can't remember what it was. The Arts Council actually gave a link to something for day rates, and I've gone and forgotten what it was too. But the BBC, just put in industry rates on your search browser and it will come up. Put audio industry rates or radio industry rates, and then a list of options will come up. For instance, an average daily rate at the moment for a project manager would be 250 quid. A producer around the same, depending on which grant you're going for.
And UCAN, I think if people look on UCAN, I think also they've got some industry rates as well for freelancers. Brilliant. And that kind of thing. Fletcher would like to know, which was the fund where you only had to send an email? That sounds like a delight.
It was amazing. So that was called Bristol Redistro. So REDISTRO, Bristol Redistro. And they are just literally a philanthropic organisation who go out there and they crowdfund, and they just want to support real grassroots organisations. So what you will find is that these kind of grant applications alienate so many people because they are so complicated. It is a real skill. You know, I might say it's not rocket science, and some of them are simpler than others, but they do this on purpose because they don't just want anybody applying. But then at the same time, what I find is if you are from a disadvantaged background, you're not academic or whatever, you're never going to be able to write these applications. So that's why Bristol Registro do what they do, and they were amazing.
It does sound remarkably straightforward, which is very appealing. Billy says, I'm a solo radio maker or sole trader. Is it easy to make my website a company?
Is it easy to make your website a company? But to establish a company costs 12 quid, I think, with Company's House. So the answer to that, I would say yes. And can you make me a website, please, Billy? Fluttering the eyelashes. I need a website. But yes, it is very simple. And actually, because that's what we found with the community radio stations and the Audio Content Fund. And they're like, but we're not a production company. So I went out and set up Sound Women, which was just a network company, as a production company. It cost me £12. It took a day.
So another question come in. I would be bidding on behalf of a company that I freelance for. Does receiving a grant or funding have any impacts, e.g. on taxes that they need to pay, that they'd need to know in advance? And then this person says, sorry, I have no idea about that side, so it's not a very precise question. Do you know about tax implications? No, I would suggest that actually that you consult an accountant or a finance person, because they will know about the tax breaks or otherwise if you get grant funding. Okay. Billy would like to know again, love your tips for success. The question to ask ourselves makes so much sense, but what about for the Arts Council England developing creative practice? Is it still advised to pose a problem that I will solve, do you think?
No, gosh, that's such a difficult application to do, develop your own creative practice. I actually went for that and failed. That's one of the failures that I had. But do you know what? The feedback I got back wasn't because there was anything wrong with my application. It was just massively competitive. And so there isn't a problem you're solving there, is there? Because you're getting money for you, for who you are. So no, I mean, but you could look at it like that, couldn't you? Why is it that you need that money? So that the problem you're solving is your next step in your career, isn't it? You want to develop your creative practice. So why do they want to invest in you? And it's trying to find something innovative about what you're doing, because they are so highly competitive. Do look at the other things that they're funding on the DYCP grants. They are phenomenal and they are incredible. And what they want to know is that their money is going to change your life. And that's what they want to see. Trust me, I've asked them. I've spoken to them about it. They want to see that this money that is really going to change your life.
Okay. Billy would like a bit of clarity around the evaluating your project. Do you mean projects you've already got funding for? Oh, and by the way, she says yes to your community radio workshop, please.
Great, thanks, Billy.
Yeah, just a bit about evaluation. What is evaluation for a project?
Okay. So when you apply for funding, they will inevitably be some kind of clause that they want proof of the workshops or grant or whatever it is that you've done. So let's just say, for an example, I'm delivering a series of arts and culture themed podcast workshops over a year. Now, I need to prove that people turned up. I need to have some kind of feedback from the participants. And then, if I did a podcast series, then how many people listened? What was the success of the grant? So that's what we mean by evaluating it. So some grants that I'm delivering at the moment, when I do my workshops, I make sure I'm taking along evaluation forms, which literally I'll hand out to people. I have them printed out and I'll get them just to write down their feedback. Did you like this workshop? If not, why not? What would you have done better? Simple questions like that. And you can go online. And do you know how I found those evaluation forms? I literally went online and did a search for saying workshop evaluation forms, and ta-da, some templates came up because I just wasn't too sure how much detail to go into. So, and what funders love is analytics and data to prove that people have engaged with your project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've found, because I've done a little bit of bid writing myself, and they can be called impact assessments as well. And really, what it is the funders want to know that their money is not just being, whittled down the drain or whatever.
Yeah,
So yeah,
we've been to the pub. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what that's about. Okay, last
Yeah,
question.
It's proving. They want proof. They want evidence
Proof.
that your
Yeah.
money's being spent well. They don't want receipts. They don't want that, but they just want evidence of what you've done.
Agreed. Tara wants to know, and this is the final question, apart from specific fee day rates, are there good examples of budget chunks, like running a series of workshops, creating a podcast? I know it can be specific to the project, but when you're starting something new, as part of our own research, what's realistic from experience of others on the projects?
Okay, really interesting. I found out that the BBC pay X amount for a half-an-hour documentary, and I'm trying to think what that X amount was. It was something like £2,500, or it could have been £4,500. Sorry, I can't remember, but that really helped me when it came to budgeting for everything else. But I don't know, Caroline, what do you think?
Well, I think each example is specific, actually, and you have to go through each chunk and say, what are the real costs in this project, and just go through it line by line, because it's something you have to work out for yourself. I don't think there is much guidance. It's a case by case basis.
Yeah.
Sorry,
go.
Sorry, I was just going to slip in one more, which is from Johnny about the Audio Content Fund, because clearly he is about to put in this application and just wonders what you do about what happens after you've put in the case, the money, you might get the money, and you have to change your production for whatever reason.
Okay, so at the end you will have been asked questions about COVID, so you just have to go then and so if it's something to do with that, you will have already done a risk assessment, and you will say that if you can still then do think about this, is that how you're going to say we end up in a national lockdown again, how are you still going to deliver your project, and make sure you can, because you can do all this remotely, because I've done all three of the ones I've done I've had to do during lockdowns. I'm gutted. I want a chance to do one not lockdown, please. But anyway, so I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Sorry.
No, you've said it. But can I just say, can you also put in a contingency fund for the Audio Content Fund, or are you not allowed to put a contingency in? Because you said originally 5%. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I did a contingency fund, absolutely. And the thing is, always just go and talk to the funders. If something's happened, then go back to them and just say, look, we can't do this. Maybe somebody's died and you can't do it. They're not, that you can change it. So, for instance, I have changed some of my audio content funds from the original thing massively. So it develops, doesn't it? As long as you've got the basic idea and you're talking to them, yes, so it can change.
Miranda, thank you. That's great. And if anybody wants to reach you after this, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, if we say soundwomennetwork@gmail.com, that's the simplest email to give out. soundwomennetwork@gmail.com.
Miranda, thank you so much. Thank you to Miranda Rae. And don't forget, we're recording this webinar. So if you want to view again, it will be on the previous webinars page of the Audio Train website. Next time, we have the former General Counsel of Global, Cliff Fluitt, and he'll be talking about intellectual property, trademarks and copyright. In other words, everything you need to know for your audio business. Until then, goodbye.